I work in the neuropharmacology of addiction lab. I'm a first year PhD student, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our research. We focus on adolescent alcohol use and its effects on reward learning. And here's just a general disclosure that I'm not receiving any or have any financial interest or conflicts. So here's just some stats. Nearly 15 million individuals aged 12 or older were identified to have an alcohol use disorder in the United States in 2019. And surveys have shown that it's prevalent among adolescents and often begins before the age of 15. And heavy drinking in adolescence has been linked to an increased risk of developing an AUD later in life. And this is what our research really focuses on, how this period of adolescence can be really harmfully affected by this heavy drinking. So adolescence is a period of ongoing brain development. There's a lot of neuroplasticity going on, which makes it more susceptible to insult by drugs or alcohol. And we also see sex differences in brain development. So we use male and female rats in our lab to look at these differences because there's differences in the way the brains form between sexes. And I've added a picture of an fMRI of a maturing brain. You can see as the color gets darker over time, that's representing more connectivity. And so in adolescence, these individuals, they tend to not drink as often as adults, on occasion, but when they do drink, they do very heavy episodic binge drinking, which has potential long-lasting effects on the brain. And we want to know, how does this impact learning later in life? Sorry, I've never given a presentation on Zoom before, so I'm getting used to the screen. So I have a funny little video to show y'all. You may have seen this. It's from the Big Bang Theory. So in our lab, we use operant conditioning to test our animals behaviorally. This looks kind of like an operant box. I'll have a picture of what ours look like later on.
There's still a new feeling.
Wait, I think you need to switch the share if you're showing it.
You may need to stop share and reshare to your video screen.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
As a whole too, if you want to do it. Yep, here we go. We can see it.
Are you finished?
Well, thank you. How thoughtful. Would you like a chocolate?
Yeah, sure. Oh, sorry, Sheldon. I almost sat in your spot.
Did you? I didn't notice. Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
You're here a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please.
So that's just a little bit a little funny way to see how operant conditioning works. That we use these techniques in our lab. And now come back in. So we focus on reward-related cues, or cues that have been things that have been paired with a reward in the past. So like if you have something with sugar in it that's rewarding paired with a certain flavor, and I'll get more into that later. So addiction is a 3-stage recurring cycle. You have binge intoxication, withdrawal negative effect, and preoccupation anticipation, which is like the craving. And this is where the cues come in. And cues can be like flavor, odor, visual. Our lab focuses on flavor in alcohol, and how that could trigger someone to relapse. So to give like an example of how this works in the real world, Josh Hamilton was a famous baseball player. I'm not sure if he still plays, but he has had repeated relapses and has struggled to stay sober from cocaine and alcohol. And so one of the things that he would do after a binge of cocaine and alcohol would be to go and get In-N-Out. And so when he was trying to stay sober and not relapse, he did an interview where he was talking about how every time he passes an In-N-Out or even just smells In-N-Out, he craves those drugs and wants to relapse. So that's how that can like cue up the addiction and make it hard to stay not relapse. So I talked a little bit about what we do behaviorally. We also look at alcohol adolescent abuse neurobiologically. So we want to know what's happening to the brain exactly to make these cues and reward cues so much a problem. So we focus on the mesolimbic dopamine system. It's a very important circuit in addiction and reward learning. So how do we do that? We do microdialysis, which involves doing stereotaxic surgery. Using a Cartesian coordinate system, we implant probes into specific areas of the brain. Right now, we're focused on the nucleus accumbens. And then after that, we do microdialysis, where we pump artificial cerebrospinal fluid through a probe and are able to collect dopamine samples or whatever neurotransmitter we're looking at the moment. So on the bottom there is what our HPLC machine looks like. That's where we run these samples, and it tells us exactly how much neurotransmitter is in each sample. So we can look at not only like how this is affecting them behaviorally, but how is this changing their dopamine compared to rats that have never had alcohol and have never had these cues paired with alcohol. So our current study is looking at binge drinking in adolescents, and we do that via vapor exposure because it's hard to get rats to drink at a binge level. So this is a way we can have an animal model and also control for the fact that they all get the same amount of vapor and alcohol exposure, just so we can control every factor. And then they go through a period of time of waiting. So the vapor happens during adolescence, and then later in adulthood, we test them behaviorally in these chambers you've seen at the bottom and see how they react to rewards paired with cues. So like recently we've done where we see how they respond to blueberry and sugar, and because sugar is like a natural reward for a rat. And then later after that, we show them just how they respond to blueberry alone. So let's say your favorite drink was a blueberry mojito, and then you're trying to stay sober and you taste blueberries later on, or something blueberry flavored. It's going to remind you, oh man, like I'm craving this drink. And that's kind of what we're showing. Like later on, after it's not paired with it, it still becomes a problem. And leads to relapse. And we also look at their appetitive versus consummatory behavior. So not just how much they will drink, but how hard they're willing to work for it. In our recent study, we found some preliminary data that actually our control animals were willing to work harder for sugar or the reward that had been prepared in the past. And we think maybe this is because it's not altering the circuit to respond to all rewards differently. It's specific to rewards that have been, it's specific to alcohol rewards. So not just any certain reward, but just alcohol, and this, which creates a big problem, you know, like as soon as you taste that, you crave alcohol. And this is a little cartoon visual of what is happening here when we give them vapor exposure. They eventually go through withdrawal. So this vapor exposure allows us to look at all 3 stages of the addiction. You've got binge intoxication, withdrawal, and then the anticipation craving later on. And so why is this research important? This research could influence prevention, possibly education. You know, the more people know about the harmful effects of adolescent alcohol abuse, the more maybe we could do to prevent it, since it leads so often to alcohol abuse problems in the future. Also, by the neurobiological information we get, there's potential for pharmacological interventions. The more we learn how these circuits work and how they're interrupted. And then also behavioral therapy, because if you can identify what someone's cues are, or what their, in a regular term, what their triggers are, then maybe you could help them avoid them more and reduce the chance of relapse.